What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over three players that I am drafting much higher than ADP on ESPN and Sleeper. You guys do not want to go into your drafts without seeing this video, seeing these guys that I am much higher on than ADP and some of the reasons why I am for it as well. So starting off at number 3, it's going to be the running back for the New York Giants, Cam Skattebo. This is the player that I have the smallest gap in my ranks versus the other ADPs. I'm ranking Cam Skattebo as my 37th ranked player off my big board, whereas Sleeper has him at 43 and ESPN has him going as the 40th player off of boards. This is a small value that you're able to get on Skattebo, in my opinion. But you might be able to see him falling more and more as this Najee Harris news keeps coming out to fruition. People getting a little scared that Najee's going to take work away from Skattebo. I personally don't worry about that one bit. I don't think it's going to affect Skattebo at all. I think it's just more for Najee to come in and be that pass blocking back out of the backfield for Harbaugh because he saw how bad Tracy was blocking in the preseason and Dart almost getting killed on that play versus the Vikings. Cam Skattebo's rookie year, some of his closest comparisons are Ashton Jeanty, Bijan Robinson, Omarion Hampton, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Those are 4 running backs that in some drafts will literally all go in the first round. Bijan and Gibbs are the 1-2 solidified almost any draft, no matter what. And then also Omarion Hampton and Jeanty are both going at the 1-2 turn. Genty's falling a little bit now because of the injury, but these are both 1-2 turn running backs. And Genty's in a terrible offense and Bijan's in a terrible offense. The Giants are going to be a better offense than the Raiders, and they're going to be a better offense than the Falcons per the implied team totals. Skattebo averaged 15.96 fantasy points per game played last season. That's including the first couple weeks where he wasn't even the starter there. He barely had any touches in week 1. If you go look back at the rookie years of those other running backs that we mentioned earlier in the video, Bijan Robinson averaged 14 points per game. Jeanty averaged 14.42 points per game. Hampton averaged 15.08 points per game. And then Gibbs averaged 16.14 points per game in his rookie year. Bijan, of course, went on to explode for over 20 points per game, as well as Gibbs in their second years, respectively. They both averaged above 20 points per game in their second year, leading to them now being these dominant players in fantasy football that are both going at the 1 and the 2 respectively in every draft, almost no matter what. And then Jeanty and Hampton, of course, they're projecting out to be those bell cow type running backs in this year. And I can't see why Cam Skattebo wouldn't be as well. This is going to be an offense that is led by Jackson Dart, who, yes, he's not going to dump the ball off that much, but Skattebo's game isn't really getting those little dump off passes anyways. Skattebo is a between the tackles bruiser running back. This offense is going to be in the red zone even more than they were last year. Now with the new offensive play calling and with the just second year Jackson Dart, second year of Cam Skattebo, and the fully healthy Malik Neighbors, and hopefully a much improved offensive line after drafting Francis Maui-Noah in the first round of the draft. I think Skattebo is almost a lock to average 20 plus points per game this year as long as he stays healthy. And at the end of the day in fantasy football, we're drafting here for upside. The only guy, there's not many guys that I fade because of injury. I don't think Skattebo is an injury-prone player. I think he just had a freak accident that happened last year, and I think he's going to be an absolute dominant player in 2026 fantasy football. And the second player that I'm drafting much higher than ADP this year, my second player that I'm drafting much higher than the consensus ADPs right now is Jalen Waddle, the current wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos. I have him ranked as my 34th player off boards, whereas he's going as the 46th pick on Sleeper and the 47th pick on ESPN. This has to be baking in a lot of extra injury risk than I personally think you need to bake in with Waddle. Like I said earlier, no matter who you are in football, you're bound to get injured at some point or another. Waddle's had his share of injuries, but Waddle was also in one of the worst offenses in the league last year with some of the worst QB play in the league by far. Jalen Waddle is going near a guy like Igbuka in these drafts, who Igbuka obviously had that crazy start to his rookie year and then kind of petered out once other guys got healthy in that offense last year as he got injured and as Baker Mayfield kind of dealt with some injuries himself. But if you look at the underlying metrics, you can't just blame Baker for this. I think Igbuka kind of fell off as defenses kind of started keying in on him more in the second half of the year. Had 1.83 yards per route run last season, compared to Jalen Waddle, who had a 2.39 yards per run. And Jalen Waddle had the worst QB play last year as well. Not to mention, Waddle had 8.31 yards per target, whereas Igbuka had 7.88 yards per target. Now, you look at the fact that Waddle is going to one of the best teams in the AFC with some of the best quarterback play in Bo Nix. Despite coming off that injury, I think Bo Nix is going to be an absolute crusher this year. I think he's going to be amazing. Denver's just a much better team overall than Tampa Bay. Even if Tampa Bay's offense slightly projects out better applied team totals, I think that could just be a schedule thing more than anything because they play in such an easy division there in the NFC South. I don't understand taking Ibuka over Waddle when Ibuka is in the exact same situation. Nothing changed other than Baker getting a little healthier. But Ibuka is still going to have target competition there. He's still going to have to deal with Chris Godwin. I think Ted Hurst is going to take more targets than people think. And there's other guys like Jalen McMillan in that offense who are still going to get targets. Whereas opposed to Jalen Waddle, he has to deal with Courtland Sutton, who's had maybe 2 good years in his whole NFL career. He's never been that elite wide receiver 1 type option on a team. And then also Pat Bryant, who I'm not worried about at all personally. This is going to be more of a rush first offense, but that's okay because that's going to open up even more opportunities, I think, for Waddle to be open because they're going to be keying in on the rush there with that 3-headed backfield that they have in Denver. So I think Waddle is going to open up the run game even more for them, and then vice versa. The run game is going to open up Waddle's ability to create out there in the middle of the field more as well. And the player I've ranked the highest compared to the ESPN and sleeper ADPs is going to be Travis Etienne, running back for the New Orleans Saints. Another guy who changed teams this offseason. He did have a really amazing year in that Liam Cohen Jacksonville Jaguars offense last year. I have him ranked as my 30th player off my board, whereas ESPN, he's going as the 37th player, and Sleeper is going as the 44th player off of boards. So he's going in the 4th, maybe the 5th round. And I think he's going to be a true bell cow back now that we see that Alvin Kamara goes down with that injury. So I think ETN will be getting that 3rd down workload. And Kamara's a guy who I think had no juice left anyways. Watching him last year, he was pretty brutal, honestly. So I think this is ETN's backfield to lose at this point. They went out and they paid him big in the offseason. They're bringing him in for a reason. This is going to be a high-powered, fast-paced offense that I think plays to the upside crazily this year. I think Shuck is going to take a big step forward. I think Olave is going to eat out there. And if Tyson's ever healthy, I think he's going to open things up even more for this offense as well. One of ETN's closest comparable age 26 seasons was that of Saquon Barkley, another running back, switched teams in the offseason, and then went on to have an absolute dominant season the next year, which I'm predicting ETN to do. Saquon averaged 15.94 points per game and then went on to average 22.21 fantasy points per game the next year. Absolute league winner that year. He was the RB1 overall. And I think ETN can do that same thing because Saquon was in a Kellen Moore-led offense that year. That Eagles offense led by Kellen Moore as the offensive play caller was absolutely insane. Saquon was schemed up so well. If you look at that offense, I don't want to say it's similar though to what the Saints are going to have. The Saints are going to have those 2 elite wide receivers in the older Olave and the young Jordan Tyson, just like the Eagles had with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And then they're having that newly signed running back over in free agency who just had like a good season, averaged about 15 points per game the year before in fantasy. I think ETN is primed to explode this year in that Kellen Moore offense. They're going to get him involved. They're going to give him the ball a ton. They paid him for a reason. I know that Kellen Moore is a pass-first offensive coordinator, but look what Saquon did in that Kellen Moore offense just a few years ago. I think ETN can do something to a similar extent this year. Maybe not RB1 overall because he's just not quite the same talent that Saquon is, but I think that ETN could have a monster mid RB1 season once again this year. One honorable mention player that I am also drafting much higher than consensus ADPs is Brian Thomas Jr. I have BTJ coming off the board as my 56th ranked player, whereas he's going 80th in ESPN and 73rd in Sleeper. This is the biggest gap by far of anyone. He does have more red flags than guys like ETN, Scat, or Waddle. Some of the underlying metrics weren't great last year. He did have very low yards per run. And just some underlying metrics, the drops were not great either. So BTJ, I do think he's going to bounce back personally. You know, he had that amazing rookie year. He's an elite prospect out of LSU. I think he's going to be just fine. I think he's going to be the wide receiver one in that offense. But I can see the downside that comes with drafting a guy like BTJ this year. As compared to ETN, Scat, Waddle, I don't really see as much of downside at all with these guys. I feel like these guys are all going to be crushers if you take them anywhere even close to where their ADP is going right now in ESPN and Sleeper. Now, if you guys have any questions, be sure to let us know down below. We're going to be rolling out some amazing content here over the coming weeks and months as the fantasy season kicks off. We're going to be doing some pretty cool things that I'm excited to keep sharing with you guys. So if you have any questions, let us know down below. Please hit the share, hit the follow, hit the like, hit the subscribe, all that good stuff so we can keep growing this channel and making content for you guys to help you win your leagues.